There we go. Episode 88 for some reason. This time with Martin. If you need to unmute again, I think.
Yeah, hey everyone.
There we go. We don't have I don't have any news lined up this week, except to be doing the 2.9 tier 1 circles this week. But otherwise, you'll spend the most of the time talking about the scheduler, Quarkus Scheduler. Before I give the word to Martin, just anyone who wants to can ask the questions in the chat, and I'll ask them to Martin. And then, otherwise, off we go. Martin, who are you and what's the schedule?
Okay, so once again, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here again. So today we should talk about Quarkus Scheduler, which is about, actually it's no rocket science. We just, in your application, if you need to execute some business logic periodically, then you need some kind of API or tool, because this business logic is not triggered by any user request or so. So in Quarkus, we have two extensions supported that should help you with this task. And in this talk or session, we should just talk about the possibilities and the features we have you could use in your application.
So basically, it's Cron for Quarkus.
Yes, more or less.
Got it.
Yeah, so as I said, we have in Quarkus, we have two extensions that can help you with this kind of task. So the first one is called Quarkus Scheduler, really simple. And it provides an API for declarative way of scheduling your methods. And then the other one is called Quarkus Quartz. And the second one is actually built on top of the first one. So we reuse the same API, but the difference is that in the second one, we integrate the Quartz library, and it should be used for more advanced use cases, like, for example, persistent jobs and so on, clustering.
So Quartz is the more known one in Java, I guess.
Yes.
Is the reason we're not using it just size and?
Yeah, basically the idea was that for simple stuff, we don't need a heavyweight library like this. We just need some lightweight solution that should be really fast and efficient. So that was the main idea. Yep. That's
it. And just I like to reiterate those of one of the things with Quarkus, we do things at build time and analyzing dependencies. And with Quartz, I believe it's very flexible, a ton of extensions. But the idea is that the smaller jar we can have, the less it'll be faster to load. So
yes, definitely. Also, like I said, for example, Quartz is a library that allows you to schedule your methods dynamically, which is something we don't support in the lightweight solution because we want to be really efficient and small. So the simple implementation we have, the set of scheduled methods is basically set in stone. Whereas in the Quartz version, you can add some scheduling jobs dynamically at runtime, which is of course not so optimal when it comes to performance and roll time and so on.
Okay, so if you want to do dynamic scheduling, you would use the Quartz extension?
Yes, exactly. I wanted to talk about this one later, but
sure. Well, no, just to explain a small difference. There are some differences. One of them is the dynamic versus static.
Yes, for sure, sure. And it's basically the idea is that you can or you should start with the simple version, with the simple extension. And once you need some more advanced stuff, you can easily switch to the other extension because we reuse the API, so it should be painless, hopefully.
Okay. And I can see Benjamin here is saying that he used Quarkus Quartz in cluster mode extensively for more than a year. And a big thank you for your work, Martin.
Well,
And
yeah, I'd like to mention that we have actually quite a few contributors, especially when it comes to Quartz integration, because of course, whenever you start doing things like clustering and persistent jobs, then it's a little bit more complicated because
well,
the more stuff you add, the more bugs you can have. So
sure.
I'd like to thank all our contributors in this area.
Okay. So you want to show some code or?
Yes, for sure. Maybe I should like to mention, maybe Max, you can post the link to the agenda we have for today, because there are a few links. Like we have several guides in our documentation. So if anyone is interested, we have a very simple one to get started. We have a like a reference guide, and then we also have a getting started guide for Quartz cluster use case, and for them we also have quick starts for them. So
Okay. Well, I posted the agenda thing. That
yeah, cool. Thanks.
so for those who want to follow.
Okay, so I'll switch to my ID.
Sure. I'll turn it on when I can see it's there.
Okay. So hopefully everyone can see my project now.
I see something at least.
Okay. Well, it's basically a very simple project. We have I generated the skeleton of the project using code Quarkus.io, and I just added. I changed the version because I want to show you something that is not in the latest stable version yet. So I changed the version of Quarkus to 2.9 release candidate, and then we have 3 extensions here. The first one is the Quarkus Scheduler. That's the, like I said, the first extension which contains the API and the simple and lightweight implementation. Then I also added REST Easy Reactive because I want to show you something in the dev UI. So we need some HTTP server. And finally, I also added Micrometer, which is here just to show the metrics integration we have with Schedule.
Cool.
Okay, and now I only have 2 classes in my project. One is called My Jobs, and I will add some scheduled stuff here. And the other one is called Business Logic. It's a cool name.
Sounds complex.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple class. It's annotated with the request code, so it's a CDI bean that lives for like a request context in the request code, and it has a unique sequence like identifier, so that we know that we are working with different instances. And this one is the method that we are going to schedule, and it's very simple. It just logs an info message with the identifier and the source.
Okay.
Right. And now I have this my jobs class, which is very simple. Does not even have a CDI annotation. I mean scope annotation, but we already have an injection point here. So I'm going to inject the business logic and execute it from my scheduled jobs. So in my agenda, there is that we should start with a very simple basic example. So let's edit something. Oh, sorry. I'll start with the simplest possible schedule method, which is interval based. So I'm going to say interval job. It's a void method because schedule method does not return anything, which kind of makes sense. We're going to call our business logic interval. And now the key part is that we need to use the schedule annotation, which is the central piece of our API, of where we declare the schedule methods declaratively. And I'm going to use the simplest possible version, which is I would like to invoke this method every 3 seconds, let's say. So I'm going to add every 3s, and this is it.
Cool.
So I'm going, sorry?
This is cool. Just to like, if you don't add anything, does it just get ignored?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
The point is that you should either use every or the other possibility. We're going to talk about this in a few seconds, which is the Cron expression. And if you don't use anything, then we fail the build because schedule method without any schedule actually does not make any sense.
Okay, so there'll be a build time exception if you do. Okay.
Of course, yeah, we will fail the build. Another interesting thing here is that we actually added a schedule annotation, but I don't need to add anything to my jobs class because we do this automatically for you. If you add a schedule method to a class which is not annotated with any scope, we just add singleton, which basically means that the class, there is one instance per the application. So I'm going to start my application in the dev mode. Now, if I manage to hit enter,
There you go.
Enter doesn't work. Never seen that before. Okay.
Oh, nice demo tag.
I think I will have to open a new terminal here. So sorry for.
Sure.
Shouldn't take a long time.
And then the business logic was in request scope. So is that request for the job or in this case?
Yeah, we basically activate the request context per the schedule method. So my terminal is now dead. I'm sorry again. So let's try it once again. Hopefully it will work now.
It's weird, it just freezes.
So Maven Quarkus Dev seems to do something.
Yay!
Yay. Okay, so now what we would like to see is that our method is basically executed every 3 seconds. So it seems to work, which is great. And we also see that the number of the ping is increased because we use the request scope bean, and each execution of the job receives a new business logic instance.
And the integer is a static one. Okay, I have missed that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, the fact that it's actually a business method of a CDI bean means that you can, for example, add interceptor bindings to your method, and it should just work. So, for example, if you add transactional here from the JTA, it will just work because we execute a method of a CDI bean. So that's it. Here we say 3 seconds, and this expression is actually parsed using the Java time duration parse method, except that we try to make it a little bit easier for users, so we don't require the PT prefix and so on. But essentially, you can do something like 3S or 10M for 10 minutes and so on. So it should be pretty simple and straightforward. Yeah, also one thing I wanted to note here is from the log, you can see that we log the thread that is used to execute the schedule method. By default, we use the default blocking thread pool from Quarkus, which is configurable and shared by many components. So that's important to know. Of course, if you use Quartz, which is the other extension, things are a little bit different because Quartz does not allow to use a custom thread pool. So it has a dedicated, again, it's a blocking thread pool, but it's dedicated to Quartz. And it's configurable via some special Quarkus Quartz properties. And why do I talk about this? Well, it's important when you start using some reactive stuff. Because, for example, if you want to use Hibernate Reactive, you cannot use the blocking thread pool, right? It doesn't work there. You need to switch to the vertex event loop, and we'll talk about this later. But essentially, we have a way how to do this automatically in the latest version of Quarkus. Okay, so this is the simple interval job, and we want to add some more advanced stuff. So let's show another one, which is going to use the Cron expression like we talked before. Cron job. We will do the same, like invoke the business logic, except that we'll use Cron, and we again need scheduled. And this time we're going to use the Cron property. The syntax we use here by default is the one from Quartz. So it's documented in the Quartz library. There is a link in the agenda, and it's configurable. So, for example, if you are used to the syntax used in Unix or Spring, then you can just change the syntax used. I'm going to use or to specify an equivalent of the interval job here. So it's like something similar. Cron expressions, if you've never seen this before, is basically 6 or, well, is it 6? Yeah, 6. So it's like something. 6 or 7 sub-expressions where you can specify the seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and so on. And there are some special characters like this asterisk, which means every. So this expression basically says every third second, in every minute, in every hour, in every day, and so on. Okay, so I just saved this. At this time, I'm not going to use dev UI, so I need to restart my application so that we can see the result. And now we should see also Cron. Okay, it seems that it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. So maybe it's the time to show you the dev UI, which is why I added the REST user reactive extension, so that we have some HTTP server in our application. So I'm going to switch to my, sorry for that. So this is my dev UI for this application.
So Martin, just 2 seconds. So I can see people saying YouTube screen is frozen, but the audio is working. So I'm just telling people that I just looked. YouTube seemed to have issues, but Facebook and Twitter and the others are working. So if people want to go live, they can follow there, or they can listen to us and see the recording later. Oh, better now. Looks like they're good. Okay, so go ahead, Martin, if you want to continue.
Yeah, of course, I want to continue. Yeah, so in this part, we have UI dedicated to scheduler. So you can basically see all the schedule methods in our application. You can see the schedule, you can see the methods. In my case, it's my job, cron job, and so on. What is interesting here that you can pause your schedule completely. So if I now go back to my command line, I can see that nothing really happens. And you can even invoke the job from the UI. So if you, for example, when you are working on the job on a specific method, then you can just hit the invoke button and it's invoked. At this time, I think it will be good to introduce another feature we have. Well, it's not a feature, but it's more like a possibility. In your scheduled method, you can also use a special attribute which is called identity. If you add an identity to your job, then you will be able to work with those jobs separately. which means that if I add, for example, here foo, and here there bar, the identity must be unique. So if I now restart my application, I can see that I have separate buttons for each of the jobs. So I can, for example, pause on the interval job, and the cron job should still work. And we can see that it works, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about the identity later, but basically, it's a way to be able to manage a very specific schedule method through the management API.
So just what happens if you have the same identity? Is just to give
It fails.
It's just instead of putting a full name, you put another name, or
If you don't set any identity, then there is generated something.
okay.
You cannot use it. If you set two identical identities to two separate methods, then the build fails because it wouldn't be able. The schedule wouldn't be able to work.
So every job has an identity. It's just this is to make it a nicer name, basically.
Yes.
Got it.
Exactly.
And I see Jan is asking, can I block bar if foo is running? Like make one depending on another, I guess, or not overlap?
Oh, once again, please. What was the question?
He's asking, can I block bar if foo is running? Like say run this, but not if other thing is running at the same time.
No. No.
I guess if you want to do that, you have to have some other synchron
I will talk about this later, but you can from the dev UI you cannot do this because it's a very simple UI.
Sure.
From your application, you can do anything you want if you have identities assigned. Because we'll talk about it later, but there is some kind of basic management API which allows you to say inject scheduler and pause this one and resume this one, whatever you need.
I can see Jan is talking about skip features. I guess we'll get to them. So
yes, definitely. Yeah, I have a note here that I should also mention one thing, and that's when you run the tests of your application, it's very often not convenient to run the schedule methods as well. So this is my application properties file in my application. And this is the way how to disable scheduler in tests only. So it's a pretty standard Quarkus configuration where you use a test profile, and then there is a configuration property which says disable scheduler completely. Because very often it might happen that your tests, if you run the schedule methods, you will somehow mess up or anything.
Yeah.
So that's just
it's just about to ask for that, but yeah. That's good.
Okay. Yeah, I also have another note, which is that actually we have one method and one schedule annotation, but scheduled is repeatable. So if you want to, you can actually schedule a single method multiple times. So if I add another schedule here and restart my application, I should see more interval jobs now because the method is actually executed every second and then every third second.
Cool. Can you refer to the identity in your?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can assign.
Well, I mean in the job. Like, how do you know what identity you are?
Yeah, in the job. Well, actually, in the job, in our case, we use methods that accept no parameters. But there is one possibility that you could actually inject or accept one parameter or argument, which is called scheduled execution. And this execution object contains some metadata about the job you're executing. If you look at the API, it has some fire time, scheduled fire time, trigger, and so on. But speaking of this, I don't think we have a way to. Yeah, it is here actually.
Get the ID. Okay.
Yeah, ID is schedule identity. So yes, you can inside the method you can detect which identity or which scheduled annotation was actually the one that triggered the execution. So this should work as well.
So if you add a plus execution.getID, the print will have it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so now this is nice, but as you can see, we have the hard-coded values here, which is not very nice, right? And it's not practical. So in the real applications, you usually need to make those things configurable, which is possible. You can basically leverage the standard Quarkus configuration facility. So in this case, I added a special property in my application properties file, but you can use also environment variables and system properties and so on.
Yeah.
Sorry. And what I do here is that I replace the hard-coded view with something we call what is it? Configuration property expression, I think.
Yeah.
It's coming from the SmallRye config library. And you basically just put the config property here. If you don't, in this case, I have it commented out. So if I now try to restart my application, it should fail because I don't have any I don't have any configuration property for this job. But I wanted to show something different. I wanted to show that you can use the default value as well. So in this case, you can say that the default value is 3 seconds. And if the value is set, then use the value. So I'm going to first restart it so that the default value should be used.
So just why doesn't it restart when you save? You turn it off or?
No, by default in Quarkus, if
you're not hitting anything. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, you would have to, for example, reload the page in the dev UI or something.
Okay.
But so if you don't have any trigger like this, then you have to restart it manually.
Okay. So
I was just lazy to.
Yeah. Okay. I was just okay. Yeah. I was like, why? But is there a reason why shouldn't the scheduler just do that? Like, oh, job started, check if restart.
Yes, I think that we even had an issue for this, but there was no interest in implementing something like this. It's probably doable. So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so what you're doing, just for those who can't see, is you go into dev mode and just press R, right?
Yeah, by default in Quarkus, whenever you send an HTTP request to your server, then we reload the application if there is some change. But this time I just did it manually because it could be even that you have an application that doesn't have an HTTP server, right? Yeah. And the scheduler should still be working.
I know. That's why I thought the scheduler actually did the same thing. Oh, a schedule is hitting. Let's reload before. But that.
Okay, so now I'm going to uncomment this one so that this configuration property should take precedence and the default value should be just ignored. So if I now restart it, it should start to ping every second, which seems to work. Also, if you look at the dev UI, you will see that this is my interval configured. You can see the configuration property, and you should see the value which was actually used, and even the identity. So we see that the default value was not used in this case. So I can do the same for my cron job, which works the same way. So I can say that this will be the default value, and this one will be the exact value. Let's see, here again is every second. So it's, and again, we can see that this is my schedule, but the configured value actually was a little bit different than the default one, right?
Cool.
So configuration, what else do we have? Yeah, so another nice and maybe sometimes even useful feature is that you can delay start of execution of your schedule method. So imagine you have an application which has some, I don't know, some heavy initialization during startup, and you don't want to execute the schedule methods because there will be, I don't know, too much resources or whatever. So you can simply say that your job is delayed and use the same strategy like we have in every. So I can say that this job will be delayed for 10 seconds, which basically means that when you start your application, you wait 10 seconds and then start executing the job. So if
Okay, so that's just a one-time delay.
yeah, it's like a startup delay, let's say.
Good.
So in this case, we should see a lot of Cron, and now the first interval, because it took like 10 seconds roughly before we started to execute the schedule method.
Nice.
Okay, so that's delayed. What else we have? Yeah, another one. It starts sometimes a little bit confusing, but it might happen that you execute a job and it takes some time. For example, you do some, I don't know, maybe work with database and so on, and it takes some time. And in the meantime, we can start another execution of the same job, right? Because the previous one was not ended yet or finished. So for this, we have a special property which is called concurrent execution strategy. And it's important to know that this only works for a single node. So it doesn't work with clustering feature of Quartz.
Yeah.
And you can basically just say whether you should proceed, which is the default behavior, which means that we execute the method again, or just skip. So now if I, in this case, in my thread cron job, I will just do something very ugly. I will just add thread sleep here. So what happens is that when the next execution of the cron job should be executed or run, then we detect this situation and say, okay, we're going to skip this one because the previous one was not finished yet.
Got it.
And this is hard to demonstrate, right? It gets quite difficult, but fortunately we have something in Scheduler. Whenever you execute a job, we fire an event, a CDI event, which says success, fail, or skipped, so that you can provide your custom logic that can react somehow. So in this case, I just want to execute some logic when skipped execution happens. So I have skipped execution. That's the payload of the event, and by the way, it contains some information about the trigger, basically the schedule execution interface. And I can just do, okay, this is logic, ping exec to string. So that's it. Because our myjobs class is basically a bean, we can add an observer method and it should just work. So let's try to restart it and wait a little bit. And we can see that this is it. Skip execution, blah, 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 reason, and some description. So this is a nice way to prevent concurrent execution of a scheduled method. So what else we have here? Yeah, another useful feature is that sometimes it's useful to provide your own custom logic to skip execution of a method. So what we provide here is that you can say on the annotation again, skip execution if, and then you provide a class. The class is actually a bean class, so that under the hood we look up the bean and invoke predicate method. And then if the predicate returns true, then we skip the method. So in this case, we're going to add and use static. How could my interval skip predicate. This skip predicate is an interface from our API and has a single method which says test and schedule execution. So in our case, we're going to just say return true, which means skip every execution. And we need to make it a bean. So let's add, for example, singleton. And now we add it here. And restart our application. And the result should be that even after this 10 seconds, we should not see any execution of the interval job, which seems to work. Right. The advantage of this approach is that you can, this is again a bean, so we can, for example, inject another bean which holds some status from your application or whatever, and it should work.
Cool. This would be here where you could also, I guess not. Well, you could add your skip predicate here that the other job is running or something. Think about Jan's. Can I make a job that won't run if this one is there?
Well, in theory, yes.
You're not a fan, it seems.
No, I mean, it's a CDI bean, so anything you can check there and inject there and test it, like a predicate, should work.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what it is. So you can we'll talk about this later, but there is a basic management API for a scheduler, which is surprise called Scheduler API or Scheduler interface. And you can, for example, if you have an identity of a job, you can inject this scheduler and say, what is the next fire time of this particular job or whatever you want to. So it's up to you. Yeah. So another thing I wanted to show is we talked about the fact that by default it's executed, the schedule method is executed on the default blocking thread pool. In case of the simplified or simple extension, and in case of Quartz, it's some dedicated blocking thread pool provided by Quartz. But very often, when you start using reactive components in your application, you need to execute your logic on event loop, I mean vertex event loop. And in this case, you can either manage this manually, which means like something like injecting vertex and creating context and so on. But in the latest version of Quarkus, we added a possibility to specify this declaratively. So I will show the simplest possible way, which is add a small I non-blocking annotation to your schedule method. If I restart my application, yeah, sorry, I need to remove the skip predicate and maybe even delay, because we wouldn't delay. As you can see now, my method is executed on event loop thread, which is really important in some cases because, like I said in the beginning, you cannot use Hibernate Reactive, for example, on a blocking thread. On the other hand, it's a little bit also, let's say, dangerous for you because, of course, if you execute something on the event loop, you should never, ever block there. So if you do some, for example, use Hibernate Classic and some JDBC stuff and so on, and it will take a long time, then you will block the event loop, which is definitely a bad idea. And you should get a big warning from Quarkus that something is wrong. And so I said, this is the simplest possible way, no blocking. But we also have another possibility, which is to return an asynchronous type from your method, which is more natural in reactive world. So I can return uni void, well, in this case, I'm a little bit cheating because I'm not using asynchronous API, so I will just return unique read from void. But this should have the same effect, like if you return univoid or a completion stage void from your schedule method, then we should see again that my schedule method is executed on the event loop thread, which is what we are looking for. Yeah, maybe, I don't know whether I mentioned this, but this should work in the latest 2.9. And actually, we found a little bug in 2.9 CR1, so you will need to wait for the final version. I mean, the bug is related to the fact that you can't still use hyper-interactive there because there is another magic we need to perform to make it work.
Cool. Yeah. So that's so the all the stuff you've shown today works in like since the last, I guess, almost a year or so. But for the univoid, that's a ROC. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said before, in all the versions, you would have to do something manually. I don't know, something maybe like injecting vertex instance. Okay, this one. And then inside the method, you would have to do something like, what is it, run on context and so on. So it's possible even now, but you need some additional code to make it work.
Got it.
The cool thing is that we are still working with beans. So whenever you need something, we just inject it and it works. Which reminds me that I wanted to show the schedule management API we have, which is again inject something. So it's called the management API, and it's basically very simple. It allows you to do the same things like we did with the def UI. So you can pause the schedule, pause a specific job, resume jobs. You can inspect the triggers, which means for a particular job, you can say, what is the next fire time? Is it next year? Is it next Monday or whatever? So this is a basic management API we provide, and it's very simple to use. You just inject it anywhere you need to and work with this. Okay, so do you have any questions so far?
I think most people are having issues with the screen. Something. So yeah.
I have two more things to talk about. One is
one question is the how do I get a high availability? But I guess that's for the Quartz extension.
Yes, we'll talk about this later, but it's you need persistent jobs basically, which means that you need to include replace the Quarkus scheduler with Quartz extension, then configure the database because the triggers and all the metadata about the jobs are stored in the database and so on.
Okay. But so you can't have both on they will fail, or
no? If you have both, then Quartz one will take precedence.
The one, okay.
I mean, you always have the artifacts from the basic extension on the class path because we reuse the API, but the scheduler implementation will be just ignored. I mean, the lightweight one when you add both.
Got it.
Okay, I wanted to show one more thing, and that's the basic metrics we have for schedule methods. It's really a simple one. Basically, if you add micrometer small array metrics extension on your class path, and then enable this configuration property, which is documented, of course, it's straightforward. Quarkus schedule metrics enable true. Then we add some basic metrics for all the scheduled methods you have in your application. So now if I uncomment this property and restart my application again, I should be able to see some metrics here.
Cool. So that's us sending out metrics, collecting metrics and then exposing the tweeters in the schedule.
Yeah, there are some basic metrics like the time it took and the count of the executions and the sum and so on.
Got it.
In this case, I just included the micrometer extension. There is no persistence and so on. It's just for demonstration purpose. So it's really simple. The way it works actually is that we add some special metadata to the schedule methods, which happen to be CDI interceptors. So they just intercept your method and add some metrics to store some metrics, so on.
Got it.
So that's it. And yeah, I have one last point, and that's about the Quartz. Because like we said in the beginning, so when you need to schedule your jobs dynamically using some programmatic API, then you have to switch to the Quarkus Quartz extension, because we don't support this intentionally in the simple lightweight implementation. So that's one use case. And the other use case is, of course, the clustering and persistent jobs, because it's really a complex task. And we don't want to, the simple schedule should be used for simple stuff. And once you need something more difficult, you should switch to the Quartz one. What I wanted to show here is that now in my application, when I replace Quarkus Scheduler with Quarkus Quartz, it should still working. Hopefully it will.
Who knows?
Who knows? Because we use the same API, but under the hood, it's integrated a little bit differently. What happens, or what is different, like I said before, we have this Quarkus Scheduler workers. This is a dedicated thread pool created by Quartz. So this cannot be changed. We need to use it. But other than that, it should behave in the same way. So that's the advantage. That, you can start with the simple extension, and once you need some really advanced stuff, it's also important to know that clustering and persistent jobs, it's a nice feature, but it's a nightmare when it comes to debugging and finding some problems. So I would recommend anyone to start simple, and then when it's really needed, switch to the advanced stuff, because otherwise,
it's going to be
you know what I mean.
All right. So basically, when you use the clustered, Quartz, you can configure database. Well, you don't have to, but you can configure database to.
By default, the simple they call it, I think, RAM job store, which means in memory scheduler. But you can configure the database one and use JDBC to store all the triggers and metadata about the jobs. And that's it. But it's, of course, need to generate a scheme and so on. So it's a little bit.
It requires more setup.
And of course, if you look at the Quartz guide we have, getting started guide, you will see that we have a lot of options and a lot of configuration properties for Quartz. Most of the time, it's like one-to-one, because we need to propagate the configuration from Quarkus to the Quartz library.
I have one question, just because I love date and time. What happened with a cron job that is set to schedule on the same time that daylight savings kicks in? Does that run twice?
I don't think so. Well, the fact is that we have an issue an open issue, or more like a feature request, that the schedule annotation should work with time zones as well, because currently we use the server time zone. So when you start your application, we use the same time zone of your server for cron jobs. So one feature request is to be able to specify a different time zone.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily the time zone of the server. It's the default time zone of the Java VM, right? Which could be different. Yeah. Right. Well, I was just wondering actually what happens. Like it doesn't matter what time zone you use. Like, just if you schedule a job, it's like from 2 to 3 it happens. But
so if you use every, then you are safe because because it's just an interval. So you should use it.
But it's like if you want to schedule every on 2:30 in the evening, then that will happen twice according to the wall clock, but not.
Well, actually, it's under the hood we use a library which is called Cron utils, I think.
Yeah.
This one is responsible for converting the Cron expression to something we can handle in Quarkus. So maybe if we look at the Cron utils docs, we can find out what
how it works. Okay. Anyway, so did we get through all the your items?
Yeah, I think so.
If I how do you call it? So the summary is that we have 2 extensions: Quarkus Scheduler and Quarkus Quartz. Hard to say. And the scheduler you start out with because it's the simplest and you require no extra overhead. It's all done at build time. The jobs are scheduled. The way they're scheduled are hard coded in the build time, which I think for most tasks is more than enough. But if you want to do more dynamic scheduling and want to have like persistent jobs, then you want to go for Quarkus Quartz. But those are the 2 reasons you would go for it, and otherwise just stay on the Quarkus scheduler.
Yeah, we should probably mention that both of the extensions should be native compatible. So you can use them when generating native executable from your Quarkus application.
Nice. Even the Quarkus one, yeah.
The Quartz one has some maybe I wouldn't call it workarounds, but the library is quite big, so it has some JMX integration and so on, which needs to be skipped. Yeah, turned off, because otherwise it wouldn't work.
Cool. Okay. And if anyone has questions, they should ask them now, because what chat also got into, we seem to have had some issues with the stream today. So hopefully the recording will be complete, because I didn't see anything on my side. But we'll see. Okay. Any other things you want to add in? All good?
I'm good. And maybe just a short promo that we should be talking about CDI non-standard features in a few weeks here.
Yes.
So it could be also interesting.
Yeah, Martin is coming back, and I'm not sure when, but we'll see. Cool. Okay. I see Jan says thank you both. So we are at least live somewhere. That's good. Cool. Okay. Then thank you, and I'll end the recording on that one.
Okay, bye.
Oh, Jan says, since when are CDI events supported? He gets that in the last second.
I don't know from the top of my head, but I need to.
It's been there a while, right?
Yes, but I'm not sure.
All right. Somewhere recently, but not too long ago.
If you need to know, just ping me on Zulip and we can find out. It should be very easy. Just look at the release notes.
Cool. Okay. This time I'm gonna end the stream. Okay. Thank you.